Michael Jordan came home expecting chaos. Instead, he heard something that made him freeze in the marble hallway. Complete silence. His heart pounded as he moved toward the soft humming coming from the playroom. When he reached the doorway, what he saw made his breath catch. His 4 sons, Ethan, Lucas, Noah, and Max, the same boys who'd terrorized 18 nannies in 6 months, were sitting in a circle on the floor. Not fighting, not screaming, not destroying anything. They were listening. And in the center of that circle sat Angela Brown, the new maid he'd hired just 3 days ago, holding a worn photo album and speaking in a voice so gentle it seemed impossible these wild boys were actually still. Michael leaned against the doorframe, afraid to breathe, afraid to break whatever spell she'd cast. In 2 years, he'd never seen this. Never. Michael Jordan had everything except the one thing that mattered: peace in his own home. 45 years old, tech billionaire, built an empire from nothing but couldn't reach for little boys. 2 years ago, his wife Elizabeth died giving birth to their quadruplet sons. 4 perfect babies arrived as their mother left this world. The doctors called it complications. Michael called it the end of everything. Ethan, Lucas, Noah, and Max, 6 years old now, angry, broken, pushing away everyone who came near. 18 nannies in 6 months. 18 trained professionals. Every single one quit. The boys would hide, lash out, scream for hours, destroy whatever they could reach. They weren't bad kids. They were hurt kids. And hurt kids hurt people. The house was a war zone. No joy, no laughter, just grief living in every corner. Then one day, a woman responded to his job posting. Angela Brown, 35, a housekeeper with no training, no experience with children, just 3 sentences on her application. I lost someone too. I understand what it means to be angry at God. I'd like to help if you'll let me. Michael almost deleted it, but something made him say yes. 3 days, he told her. She nodded quietly. 3 days. The boys tested her hard, but she didn't break, didn't run, just stayed. And on day 3, something happened that changed everything. Michael came home early. The house was quiet, too quiet. Then he heard that soft humming coming from the playroom. He walked toward the sound, heart pounding, and what he saw when he stepped through that doorway, he'd remember for the rest of his life. He took a careful step forward, his expensive shoes silent on the hardwood floor. Angela looked up. Their eyes met across the circle of boys, and in that moment, something passed between them: recognition, understanding, shared knowledge of what it meant to survive impossible loss. She didn't stop talking. Her voice remained steady, gentle, as she turned another page in the album. Michael's eyes dropped to what the boys were seeing. Photos. A little girl with Angela's smile, Angela's eyes. In one picture, she was blowing out candles on a birthday cake. In another, chasing butterflies in a garden. In another, lying in a hospital bed, her head wrapped in a colorful scarf, still smiling despite everything. "This is my daughter," Angela was saying softly. Her name was Grace. She was 6 years old, just like you, when she died. The words hung in the air like a bridge between broken hearts. Ethan, always the skeptical one, leaned closer. "You had a daughter?" "I did. The most beautiful, funny, brave girl in the whole world." "What happened to her?" Lucas asked, his usual anger softened to something gentler. "She got sick. Very sick. And even though I prayed and the doctors tried everything, sometimes sick doesn't get better. Sometimes people we love have to leave us, even when we'd give anything for them to stay." Noah, who hadn't spoken more than 10 words in 3 months, whispered, "Like our mom." Angela nodded. "Like your mom." Max crawled closer, his small hand reaching out to touch Grace's picture. "Does it still hurt?" "Every single day," Angela said honestly. "But you know what I learned? Missing someone means you got to love them. And love is worth the hurt." Michael's vision blurred. Tears he didn't know he was holding streamed down his face. His chest felt like it was splitting open. For 2 years, he'd hired people to fix his sons. Therapists to analyze them. Specialists to manage them. Nannies to control them. But no one had ever just sat with them in their pain and said, "I understand. I've been there too. You're not alone." The room wasn't silent anymore, but it wasn't filled with chaos either. It was filled with something Michael couldn't name, but could feel in every corner of his chest. For boys who'd spent 2 years believing they were too broken to love, discovering that the woman in front of them understood exactly what that felt like. That she'd survived it. That maybe, just maybe, they could too. Michael stood frozen in that doorway, speechless, watching his sons look at Angela like she'd just handed them something they'd been desperately searching for. Permission to grieve, and hope that grief wouldn't destroy them. How did they get here? How did this woman, this impossible, unexpected woman with her own shattered heart, reach for boys that no one else could touch? What happened in these 3 days that changed everything? To understand that moment, you need to know how broken they all were before Angela arrived. You need to see the morning everything fell apart for the last time before it could start coming together. The morning that proved, once and for all, that Michael Jordan had run out of options, out of hope, and out of time. But before I show you what happened that sad morning, subscribe, like this video, and tell me where in the world you're watching from. This story will remind you that sometimes when we've lost all hope, that's exactly when God shows up and miracles happen. 2 years ago, Michael Jordan's world shattered in a hospital room. He remembered every detail with the kind of clarity trauma burns into your brain. The fluorescent lights too bright overhead. Elizabeth's hand going cold in his. The doctor's mouth moving, saying words like hemorrhage and complications and unavoidable, while 4 tiny cries filled the room. His sons arriving as their mother departed. For perfect babies who would never know their mother's touch. For boys Michael had to raise alone while the woman he loved was wheeled away on a gurney, a white sheet pulled over her face. Michael was 43 years old, a tech billionaire worth more money than most people could imagine, and completely powerless to bring back the one person who mattered. The first year was a blur. Night nurses who kept the babies alive. Day nurses who changed diapers and warmed bottles. Michael buried himself in 18-hour workdays because it hurt less than coming home to a house full of infant cries and empty spaces where Elizabeth should have been. Her coffee mug still in the cabinet. Her bathrobe still hanging on the bathroom door. Her side of the bed growing colder every night. But babies grow. And by the time Ethan, Lucas, Noah, and Max turned 2, they didn't need professional care anymore. They needed a mother. They needed love. They needed someone who saw them as more than a job. That's when the nannies started coming. And leaving. Nanny number 1 lasted 3 weeks. The boys were too energetic, she said. Too demanding. Too much for one person to handle. Nanny number 2 made it 5 days before she found her car keys at the bottom of the garden pond, courtesy of Ethan's strategic thinking and Lucas's strong throwing arm. Nanny number 3 quit after the boys, led by Ethan's careful planning, convinced their brothers to lock her in the upstairs bathroom for 2 hours while they ate ice cream downstairs. By the time the boys turned 6, the pattern was brutally clear. They didn't want help. They didn't want strangers in their mother's house, sleeping in their mother's guest room, trying to take their mother's place. They wanted what they couldn't have, the woman who died bringing them into the world. So they punished everyone who tried to fill that impossible void. Michael watched his sons transform from sweet toddlers into 4 angry forces of nature. Ethan became the strategist, cold and calculating, always 3 steps ahead, orchestrating his brother's chaos like a tiny general commanding troops. Lucas became the fighter, solving every problem with his fists, breaking toys, breaking furniture, breaking anything within reach when the rage became too much. Noah withdrew completely, stopped talking for months at a time, communicated only in grunts and glares and long silences that felt like accusations. And Max, the baby by 3 minutes, cried for hours at a time, not because he was hurt or hungry, but because he didn't have words for the emptiness inside him. 18 nannies in 6 months. Each one came with impressive credentials and glowing references. Each one left defeated. Some in tears. One actually threatened legal action after Noah deliberately released her expensive parrot from its cage, and the bird flew away, never to return. The house became a war zone. Toys used as weapons. Food thrown at walls like paint. Furniture broken deliberately, methodically, like the boys were trying to destroy their home before it could destroy them first. Michael tried everything. Child psychologists who nodded sympathetically and said the boys needed time. Behavioral specialists who created elaborate reward systems that Ethan immediately figured out how to game. A A parade of experts who left thick reports full of clinical language and exactly zero solutions. One night, Michael stood at his bedroom window looking down at his sons in the backyard. They were digging holes in the garden, burying toys, having elaborate funeral services for stuffed animals. He watched Ethan place a teddy bear in a hole while his brothers gathered around. They bowed their heads. Max was crying. Lucas had his fists clenched, even in grief. Noah stood apart, watching but not participating. The next morning, Michael found the therapist's note on his desk. Practicing grief. Processing loss. This is their way of trying to understand death. But understanding didn't make it hurt less. Understanding didn't teach 4 boys how to live with the fact that their mother had chosen. No, not chosen, that wasn't fair, that their mother had died saving them. That their very existence had cost her everything. And sometimes, late at night when Michael was honest with himself, he wondered if his sons looked at him and saw the man who survived when she didn't. The man who got to live while she paid the ultimate price. The man who was supposed to fix this and couldn't. He stood at that window night after night, watching his sons bury their toys and bury their pain and bury any chance they had at normal childhood, and he didn't know how to reach them. Didn't know how to tell them it wasn't their fault. Didn't know how to convince them they were worth loving when everyone they met eventually decided they were too broken, too damaged, too much trouble. Michael Jordan had built a tech empire from nothing. Had negotiated billion-dollar deals. Had solved problems that would break other men. But he couldn't solve this. Couldn't fix his own sons. Couldn't bridge the gap between the father standing at the window and the 4 boys burying their grief in the garden below. That was his breaking point. Standing at that window, completely lost, with no answers and no hope and no idea what to do next. He just didn't know yet that sometimes, when you've run out of options, that's exactly when the right one appears. When Angela Brown responded to the job posting, Michael almost deleted her application. He sat in his home office on a Saturday afternoon, scrolling through yet another batch of candidates his assistant had forwarded. Each resume looked identical. Bachelor's degrees in early childhood education, glowing references from previous families, years of experience with challenging children. He'd seen it all before. Hired it all before. Watched it all fail. Then he opened Angela Brown's application, and everything about it was wrong. No childcare experience. No formal training. Just a decade of housekeeping work for various families in the area. Her resume was sparse, almost apologetically brief. But it was her cover letter that made him pause. 3 sentences, that was all. I lost someone too. I understand what it means to be angry at God. I'd like to help if you'll let me. Michael's finger hovered over the delete button. This woman was completely unqualified. She wasn't even applying for a nanny position. She'd responded to a housekeeping posting. What could she possibly offer that 18 trained professionals couldn't? But something in those 3 sentences felt true in a way nothing else had in 2 years. His assistant, David, appeared in the doorway with his afternoon coffee. Any promising candidates, sir? Define promising, Michael said tiredly. He turned his laptop around. What do you make of this one? David read the screen, his expression carefully neutral. Sir, she has no childcare credentials whatsoever. I noticed. And frankly, after I made calls to 6 different agencies this week, our situation has gained something of a reputation. Most professionals won't even consider the position. That bad? The Jordan boys are somewhat legendary, sir. In the worst possible way. Michael closed his eyes. His son's pain had become industry gossip. What about her? He gestured to the screen. She's never worked with children professionally. I'd recommend. 3 days, Michael interrupted. Hire her for 3 days. For housekeeping only. Make that very clear. The boys are not her responsibility. She's here to clean, cook, maintain basic order. That's all. David hesitated. Are you sure that's wise, sir? I stopped being wise 6 months ago, David. Now I'm just desperate. Monday morning arrived gray and heavy. Michael stood at his kitchen window, watching the circular driveway. At exactly 8 o'clock, an old sedan pulled up. A woman emerged carrying 1 suitcase and a small box she held carefully against her chest. Angela Brown was 35, though her eyes looked older. She wore simple clothes, jeans and a white t-shirt, both clean but worn soft from years of use. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun, but it was her eyes that Michael noticed when she rang the doorbell. Dark, sad eyes that had seen loss and somehow survived it. "Ms. Brown," he said, opening the door. "Welcome, Mr. Jordan. Thank you for this opportunity." She didn't smile, didn't try to charm him or impress him. She just stood there, calm and present, like she'd already made peace with whatever was about to happen. The boys found her within minutes. Ethan appeared first, arms crossed, chin up. "Who are you?" "My name is Angela. I'm here to help your father with the house." "We don't need help," Ethan said coldly. "And you won't last anyway." "Nobody does." Angela met his eyes steadily. "That may be true, but I'm here today, and today is all any of us really have." Before Ethan could respond, Lucas deliberately swept his arm across the entrance table. A crystal vase, one of Elizabeth's favorites, crashed to the floor, shattering into 1,000 pieces. He stared at Angela, waiting for the yelling, the anger, the proof that she was just like all the others. Angela looked at the shattered glass, then back at Lucas. "That must have been important to someone once," she said quietly. "I'll clean it up. No accusations. No punishment. Just acknowledgement and action." Noah disappeared immediately, probably to one of his hiding spots behind the furnace or under the stairs. Max, sensing the tension, started his afternoon meltdown right on schedule. The screaming that usually lasted for hours, designed to drive away anyone with working eardrums. Angela didn't try to stop him. She just picked up the broom, started sweeping glass, calm and steady like she had all the time in the world. Michael watched from his office doorway, fascinated and confused. She wasn't doing anything. She was just present. And when she passed the boys on her way to get the dustpan, she smiled. Not a fake, bright smile. A sad, understanding smile that seemed to say, "I see you. I see your pain. And I'm not afraid of it." Day 1 unfolded like a masterclass in patience. The boys escalated their tests, hiding cleaning supplies, accidentally spilling juice, creating messes as fast as Angela could clean them. She never reacted, never raised her voice, just kept working, kept humming softly, kept being there. Day 2 brought more elaborate sabotage. They put salt in the sugar bowl, hid her car keys. Ethan orchestrated a complex trap involving a bucket of water balanced on a door. Angela triggered it, got soaked, and simply changed her shirt and continued cooking dinner. When Ethan asked why she wasn't mad, she said, "I've survived worse than water, sweetheart." Day 3 morning, Michael left for work anxious and uncertain. He couldn't focus on his meetings. By early afternoon, he told his driver, "Take me home." The house was quiet when he arrived. Too quiet. David, who'd been overseeing things, met him in the foyer with an odd expression. "Sir, you should see this yourself." "What happened? Did she quit?" "No, sir. The opposite." Michael's heart pounded as he walked down the hallway toward the sound of soft humming coming from the playroom. Each step felt heavy with possibility and fear. What would he find? What had changed? What had this impossible woman done in just 3 days that 18 trained professionals couldn't do in 6 months? He reached the doorway and stopped, his breath catching in his throat. And there it was, the moment that would change everything. The moment he'd remember for the rest of his life. Michael stepped fully into the playroom, moving slowly, afraid his presence might shatter whatever fragile peace had settled over the room. Angela sat cross-legged on the floor, the photo album open in her lap. His 4 sons formed a semicircle around her, close enough to see the pictures clearly, their usual restless energy replaced by something Michael had almost forgotten they were capable of: stillness. Real stillness, not the frozen tension before a storm, but actual peace. She loved butterflies, Angela was saying, her finger tracing a photograph. "See this one?" She spent an entire afternoon in the garden trying to catch this monarch. She never did, but she laughed the whole time trying. Michael could see the image from where he stood. A little girl with pigtails and Angela's warm smile, arms outstretched, chasing something just out of frame. The picture radiated joy so pure it hurt to look at. How old was she here? Ethan asked, his calculating defenses lowered. Just a 6-year-old boy curious about another child's life. 3. This was before. Angela paused, turned the page. This was Grace as a baby. And here, on her 2nd birthday. She smashed her entire piece of cake with both hands and got frosting everywhere. The boys leaned closer. Even Noah, who usually kept his distance from everyone, pressed in to see. The photos showed a progression: a chubby baby, a laughing toddler, a bright-eyed little girl blowing out candles on a birthday cake shaped like a butterfly. Then the pictures changed. Hospital rooms. A small head wrapped in a colorful scarf. The same beautiful smile, but with shadows under her eyes, and 4 lines visible in one thin arm. Grace got sick when she was 4, Angela said quietly. The doctors called it leukemia, a kind of cancer that made her very, very sick. Did you take her to the hospital? Lucas asked, his usual aggression replaced by genuine concern. So many times I lost count. For 2 years we fought it together. Hospitals, treatments, medicine that made her feel even worse before it could make her better. Hope and despair, back and forth, like waves. Angela's voice remained steady, but Michael could see her hands trembling slightly on the album. I sat by her bed every single night, held her hand, prayed every prayer I knew, begged God to save her, to take me instead, to do anything but take my baby. The room held its breath. Grace died on a Tuesday morning, Angela continued, her voice barely above a whisper. She was holding my hand. She told me it was okay to be sad. 6 years old, dying, and she was trying to make me feel better. Max's bottom lip quivered. Ethan's eyes glistened with tears he was trying not to shed. Did you get mad at God? Ethan asked quietly, voicing the question Michael suspected his sons had been carrying for 2 years. Angela met his eyes, honest and direct. Yes, very mad. For a long time. I screamed at him, blamed him, told him I'd never forgive him for taking her. Did it hurt? Lucas whispered. More than anything in the world. More than I thought it was possible to hurt and still be alive. Then Noah spoke, actually spoke, his voice rusty from months of silence but clear. Do you still miss her? Angela's tears spilled over. Every single day. Every single hour. Sometimes every single breath. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. But you know what I learned? Missing her means I got to love her. And love is always worth it, even when it hurts. Max didn't ask permission. He simply crawled into Angela's lap, his small body seeking the comfort she seemed to radiate. She wrapped her arms around him naturally, like it was the most normal thing in the world. After Grace died, Angela continued, her voice steadier now with Max's weight against her chest, I didn't want to live anymore. I lost my job because I couldn't function. Lost my apartment. Hit bottom so hard I didn't think I'd ever get back up. What happened? Ethan asked. My sister found me. Saved me, really. Got me help. Took me to this small church where an old woman told me something I didn't want to hear but needed to. God keeps some people alive not for what they had, but for what they're meant to give. Michael felt those words pierce his chest from across the room. I started cleaning houses, Angela said. Barely surviving. Just going through the motions of being alive. Then one Sunday at church, I heard someone mention a family. A man with 4 boys. Everyone said these boys were impossible. Broken beyond help. That no one could reach them. She looked around at each boy's face. And something woke up in me. Because I knew what it felt like to be called impossible. To be looked at like you're too damaged to save. And I thought, maybe that's why I'm still here. Maybe I was kept alive to help save you. From his place in the doorway, Michael's throat tightened, tears streaming freely down his face. This wasn't about behavioral techniques or management strategies. This wasn't about credentials or experience. This was about one broken person recognizing other broken people and saying, I see you. I've been there. We can heal together. Ethan stood up slowly. He walked to Angela and pointed at the photograph of Grace in the hospital, the one where she was still smiling despite everything. Can I see the picture of her again? All 4 boys crowded around the album now, their small fingers careful not to touch the precious images, just looking, really looking at the little girl who understood loss before they did. She looks nice, Lucas said softly. Angela smiled through her tears. She was. Brave and funny and kind. She looked at each boy individually. Just like you. They didn't test her after that. Didn't run away or break things or scream. They just sat with her in the quiet, for boys and a woman, all of them carrying grief too heavy for their bodies, finally understanding they didn't have to carry it alone. Michael stood in that doorway and finally understood. His sons didn't need someone to fix them. They needed someone who knew what it felt like to be broken. And somehow, impossibly, she'd found them. The next 3 weeks brought changes so small, Michael almost missed them. After that afternoon in the playroom, Angela became permanent. Officially, she was still the housekeeper. Michael hadn't figured out how to explain what she actually was. Unofficially, she was so much more. The house felt different with her in it. Quieter, but not the tense silence of waiting for explosions. This was the quiet of peace slowly taking root. Week 1 started with morning routines. Michael woke to sounds he'd forgotten existed. Someone humming in the kitchen, the smell of fresh coffee and scrambled eggs, the gentle clink of plates being set at the table. He came downstairs to find Angela at the stove, hair pulled back, moving with the easy confidence of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. One by one, the boys appeared. Finn first, suspicious as always, hovering in the doorway. Then Lucas, drawn by the smell. Noah peeked around the corner. Max came last, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Angela didn't make announcements or demands. She just set 4 plates at the table and said, "Would you like to join me?" They sat cautiously, testing, waiting for the trick, for the conditions. For the moment she'd reveal this was all temporary. Ethan stared at his eggs. "You're still here." "I told you I would be," Angela said simply, passing him the toast. The breakthrough moments came in fragments, so small you'd miss them if you weren't watching carefully. Lucas picked up a puzzle piece one afternoon, looked at it, looked at Angela, and instead of throwing it, asked, "Can you help me find where this goes?" Noah spoke 3 full sentences in one day. Actual words, not grunts. "I'm hungry. Can I have juice?" "Thank you." Max went 2 hours without a meltdown, just playing quietly with blocks while Angela folded laundry nearby. And Ethan, cautious, calculating Ethan, smiled. Just once, when Angela made a silly face trying to flip a pancake, but it counted. It counted so much. Michael watched from the margins, seeing connections form that he didn't quite understand, but couldn't help admiring. His sons were softening. Not fixed, not healed, but softening. Like ice beginning to thaw. Week 2 brought the real test. Michael came home from work to find Angela in the hallway, absolutely drenched. Water dripped from her hair, her clothes, pooling on the marble floor. His heart sank. The boys had finally done it. Broken her. Driven her away like all the others. He rushed forward. "Ms. Brown, I'm so sorry. I'll talk to them. Please don't." But then Angela laughed. Clear, warm, genuine laughter that echoed through the hallway. "I guess it's raining indoors today," she said, wringing out her sleeve. Michael stared. At the end of the hall, his 4 sons stood frozen, their elaborate traps sprung, water buckets, toy cars scattered on the stairs, a fake spider hanging from the ceiling. All triggered, all successful. And she was laughing. Angela walked forward carefully, her feet finding the toy cars. But instead of tripping, she stepped through them gracefully, almost like dancing, each movement deliberate and light. She picked up the fake spider, held it gently in her palm. "You know," she said softly, looking at the boys, "even the things we're afraid of are usually just afraid themselves. This little spider is more scared of me than I am of it." She set it carefully on the hall table, right next to a family photograph. The boys didn't know what to do with someone who turned their weapons into lessons without making them feel ashamed. That evening, Michael heard small footsteps outside Angela's room. He watched from the stairs as all 4 boys stood in the hallway, holding the empty bucket between them, the weapon they'd used against her. They were returning it. Ethan knocked quietly. Angela opened the door, saw them standing there, saw the bucket. "Thank you for trusting me with your test," she said gently. "Did I pass?" Ethan looked at his brothers, then back at her. "You're still here. I told you I would be." Week 3 brought deeper integration. Angela started teaching the boys to cook simple things. They made cookies together one afternoon, flour everywhere, chocolate chips on the floor, more mess than results, but they did it together. For boys and a woman who'd lost her own daughter, creating something sweet from basic ingredients. Story time began that week. Every night after dinner, Angela would gather the boys in the living room and read to them. Not typical children's books about talking animals and magical adventures. She read them stories about people who'd faced impossible things and survived. Stories about loss and healing and finding hope in unexpected places. On the third evening, Michael stood in the hallway listening. Then, quietly, he entered the room and sat in the chair at the back. The boys noticed. Ethan glanced at him, then back at Angela. No one said anything. No one objected. Michael stayed. Something was forming here. Something that looked almost like family. Not the family they'd lost, but maybe possibly a new kind. Built not on blood or obligation, but on choice. On showing up. On staying. That night, long after the boys were asleep, Michael sat in his office reviewing security footage. He watched Angela with his sons, frame by frame. Her patience. Her presence. The way she met them exactly where they were without trying to pull them somewhere else. The way his sons, his impossible, broken, angry sons, were slowly, carefully beginning to trust her. "Who is this woman?" he whispered to the empty office. "And why does watching her with my sons make my chest ache?" He didn't have an answer yet, but he was starting to suspect that the ache wasn't pain. It was something else. Something that felt dangerously close to hope. And maybe, underneath that, something even more dangerous, the possibility of healing. Not just for his sons, but for all of them. June arrived with its impossible holiday, Father's Day. Michael saw the shift immediately. The boys became tense, withdrawn, their 3 weeks of progress evaporating like morning fog. Ads were everywhere, smiling fathers tossing baseballs with sons, families gathering for backyard barbecues, children presenting handmade cards with crayon hearts. Every commercial, every store display, every social media post was a reminder of what his sons didn't have, what he'd failed to give them. Ethan went quiet first, stopped making eye contact with Michael entirely. When Michael asked him questions, he'd answer in monosyllables, his gaze fixed somewhere past his father's shoulder. Lucas started picking fights, not with his brothers, specifically with Michael. Accidentally bumping into him in the hallway, knocking over his coffee mug, contradicting everything he said. Noah disappeared more often, spending hours in his hiding spots where no one could reach him. And Max asked the question one evening at dinner, his small voice cutting through the forced normalcy. "Why didn't you save her?" The table went silent. Angela's hand paused mid-reach for the water pitcher. "What?" Michael managed. "Mommy, why didn't you save her?" Michael felt the air leave his lungs. "Max, I tried. The doctors tried. Sometimes people get sick, and—" "But you're here," Max said, his eyes filling with tears. "And she's not." Michael had no answer. How do you explain to a 6-year-old that life isn't fair? That sometimes the best people die while others live? That he'd give anything, everything, to trade places? Angela witnessed it all from across the table, saying nothing, but Michael could feel her seeing everything. His devastation, his guilt, his complete inadequacy as a father. Father's Day morning arrived heavy with unspoken tension. Michael woke early, tried to act like it was a normal day. He made coffee, read the news, pretended his hands weren't shaking. The boys came down to breakfast one by one, but they wouldn't engage, wouldn't look at him. The air felt thick with something dangerous. It was Ethan who broke first, his voice cold and precise as a scalpel. "You didn't save her. You let her die." Michael's coffee cup froze halfway to his mouth. "Ethan, we don't have a mom because you couldn't keep her alive," Lucas added, his face flushed with anger and grief tangled together. "That's not," Michael started, but his voice cracked. "I tried. I would have given anything. But you didn't die," Noah said, speaking clearly for the first time in days. "She did. And we got you instead." The words hit like bullets, each one finding its mark. Michael felt his walls crumble, all the careful control he'd maintained for 2 years shattering completely. He stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. I have to." He couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't breathe. He walked quickly to his office, closed the door, and let himself break. In the living room, his 4 sons sat in their own storm of guilt and grief. They'd said the things they'd been thinking for 2 years, the poisonous thoughts that had been eating them alive. And now those words were out in the world, hurting the one person who'd never left them. Ethan's hands shook. Lucas was crying. Noah had pulled his knees to his chest. Max whispered, "I didn't mean it. I didn't mean it." But they couldn't take it back. The words were said. Angela found Michael in his office, the door cracked, his head in his hands, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. She didn't enter. Just stood in the doorway, her presence quiet and steady. Mr. Jordan, they don't mean it. They're just trying to give their pain to someone who can carry it. Maybe they're right, Michael choked out. Maybe I should have. Don't finish that sentence. Angela's voice was firm, almost sharp. You survived. That's not a crime. Michael looked up, his face wet with tears. Grace's father left before she got sick, Angela said softly. Couldn't handle the possibility of losing her, so he left first. He's alive somewhere, and I've hated him for it. But you stayed. You're here. You've been here every day for 2 years, trying to figure out how to love boys who keep pushing you away. That matters more than you know. They hate me. They're terrified of loving you and losing you too. It's easier to push you away first than to risk the pain of losing another parent. Angela paused. Tell them you're scared too. They need to know you're human. That grief lives in you the same way it lives in them. Michael wiped his eyes, took a shaking breath, and stood. He walked to the living room where his 4 sons sat in miserable silence. Without a word, he lowered himself to the floor, not on the couch, not in a chair, but on the floor with them, at their level. He hadn't done that in months. Maybe years. I'm scared every day, he said, his voice rough. Scared I'll lose you. Scared I'm not enough. Scared I failed your mother by not somehow keeping her here. Scared you'll grow up hating me for surviving when she didn't. The dam broke. Ethan was first, tears streaming down his face as he collapsed against Michael's shoulder. Then Lucas, then Noah, then Max, all of them crying. Really crying, not the angry screaming or bitter silence, but the deep, aching sobs of children who'd been holding everything in for too long. Michael wrapped his arms around as many of them as he could reach, and he cried with them. We miss her, Ethan sobbed. Me too, Michael whispered. Every day. Every single day. We're sorry, Lucas choked out. We didn't mean. Me too. I'm so sorry. For all of it. From the archway, Angela stood watching, silent tears streaming down her own face. 5 people sitting on the floor, holding each other, finally grieving together instead of alone. Finally admitting that they were all scared, all broken, all desperately trying to figure out how to live with the enormous absence at the center of their lives. It wasn't healing. Not yet. But it was honest. And sometimes, honesty is where healing begins. Late that night, after the boys were asleep, Michael found Angela in the kitchen. He couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw his sons' faces twisted with pain, heard their accusations, felt the weight of Noah's words. We got you instead. So he came downstairs, drawn by the soft light under the kitchen door. Angela sat at the table with a cup of tea, Grace's photo album open in front of her. She was studying a picture of her daughter, 6 years old, laughing, covered in paint. May I join you? Michael asked quietly. Angela looked up and nodded, gesturing to the chair across from her. They sat in silence for a long moment. But it wasn't an uncomfortable silence anymore. It was the quiet of 2 people who'd survived impossible things and found each other in the aftermath. Thank you, Michael finally said. For today. For everything. Angela smiled slightly. You did the hard part. You let them see you broken. That took more courage than you know. Michael's eyes drifted to the photo album. Tell me about her? Grace. Really tell me. Angela's fingers traced the edge of the picture. She loved butterflies. Obsessed with them. She wanted to be a veterinarian when she grew up. She'd line up all her stuffed animals and give them checkups. Very serious, very thorough. She'd use a jump rope as a stethoscope and tell me which animals needed surgery and which ones just needed extra cuddles. Michael smiled despite the ache in his chest. She made me laugh every single day, Angela continued, her voice soft with memory. Even on the hardest days, she'd find something funny. A weird cloud. A silly word. The way our neighbor's cat walked. She had this gift for seeing joy in tiny things. When did she get sick? She was 4. We were at the playground, and she fell. Just a normal kid fall, nothing dramatic. But the bruise wouldn't heal. Then more bruises appeared. She was tired all the time. I took her to the doctor thinking maybe she was anemic or had low iron. Angela paused, her jaw tightening. The world stopped the day they said leukemia. How long did you fight it? 2 years. Hospitals, treatments, hope, crushing disappointments, then hope again. It was like drowning and surfacing and drowning again, over and over. Grace never complained. Not once. She'd throw up from the chemo, and then ask if we could play a game. She'd lose her hair and pick out the prettiest scarves. She just kept fighting. Michael's throat tightened. The last day. Angela's eyes filled with tears. She knew. I don't know how, but she knew. She looked at me and said, "It's okay to be sad, Mommy. But don't be sad forever." 6 years old, and she was trying to give me permission to survive losing her. A tear slid down Angela's cheek. I held her as she died, felt her go, and something in me died with her. What happened after? Darkness. Complete darkness. I lost my job because I couldn't function. Lost my apartment. Hit bottom so hard I tried 3 times to. She stopped, took a breath. My sister found me the last time. Saved me. Got me help. Took me to this small church where an old woman told me something I didn't want to hear. God keeps some people alive not for what they had, but for what they're meant to give. And you believed her? Eventually. I started cleaning houses. Just surviving, going through the motions. Years passed like that, breathing, working, existing, but not really living. Then one Sunday at church, I heard someone mention 4 boys. Everyone said they were impossible, that no one could reach them. Angela looked at Michael. Something woke up in me. I thought maybe this was why I was still here. Michael stared at his hands. I watch you with them and I feel. He struggled for words. Grateful. But also jealous. Angela supplied gently. He nodded, ashamed. You reach them in ways I can't. I reach them because I'm not their father, Angela said. There's no weight of expectation with me. No history. No guilt. But you, Michael, they need you to reach them differently. They don't need you to fix their grief or take away their pain. They need you to share yours. To show them that their father is human, that he hurts too, that grief doesn't make you weak. What if I'm not enough? Angela's eyes met his across the table. What if you are, and you just haven't believed it yet? The moment stretched between them, something unspoken passing in the space where their gazes held. Michael felt his heart skip. Angela's breath caught slightly. Then both looked away, not quite ready to name what was forming between them. How do you do it? Michael asked after a moment. Love them, knowing loss is always possible? Angela was quiet for a long time. Because not loving them would be a different kind of death. And I've already died enough. She looked at him again. Love isn't safe, Michael. It's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be brave. Michael felt something crack open in his chest. In that moment, sitting in his kitchen in the middle of the night with this woman who'd lost everything and still chose to love, he realized he was falling in love with her. Maybe it had been since the moment he saw her kneeling in the playroom with his sons, sharing her deepest pain to help heal theirs. And from the way Angela quickly looked away, the slight flush on her cheeks, the way her hands trembled just slightly around her teacup, he suspected she felt it too. But neither of them said it. Not yet. The night was too fragile, too full of other truths that needed space to breathe. They sat in that kitchen until dawn began to paint the windows gray, talking about loss and healing and hope, about Grace and Elizabeth, about 4 boys learning to trust again, about broken people learning that broken doesn't mean beyond repair. When the sun finally rose, they both stood, the unspoken thing between them acknowledged, but not yet named. Something had shifted. They both felt it. But some shifts need time to settle before you can see what they've created. Michael watched Angela climb the stairs to her room, and he knew with certainty his life was changing. Not just his sons' lives, but his. And he was terrified. And he was grateful. And he was for the first time in 2 years actually alive. August brought heat and something else, laughter. Real laughter that echoed through the halls and spilled out open windows. The sound of children who'd remembered how to be children. 2 months since Angela arrived, and the house was different. Not perfect, not fixed, but alive in a way it hadn't been since Elizabeth died. The boys were healing. Not cured, not without their hard days, but genuinely healing. Ethan led with kindness now instead of cold calculation, helping his younger brothers with patience Michael didn't know a 6-year-old could possess. Lucas built instead of destroyed. He'd made a wooden toy car for Max, clumsy but crafted with such care that Max slept with it every night. Noah talked regularly now, told elaborate stories about dragons and spaceships, asked questions about everything. And Max hadn't had a major meltdown in 3 weeks. Family routines had established themselves naturally. Breakfast together every morning, Angela cooking while the boys set the table. Story time each evening. Walks after dinner when the heat broke and the summer air turned gentle. Michael left work earlier now, joined activities, was actually present instead of hiding in his office. Friday night became movie night. Michael sat on one end of the couch, Angela on the other, for boys squeezed between them like a bridge connecting two halves. They were watching some animated film about talking fish when Max climbed into Angela's lap and fell asleep, his small body completely relaxed. Ethan, usually so guarded, leaned against Michael's shoulder. Lucas's head rested on Noah's legs. They were a tangle of limbs and trust. Michael's eyes met Angela's over the boys' heads. Something passed between them, unspoken acknowledgement, shared wonder. "This feels like family," his eyes said. "Yes," hers answered. "It does." The next day, Michael noticed the boys whispering. They'd huddle in corners, stop talking when he approached, giggle secretively. He caught fragments. "We have to make sure Dad knows. And Angela too. But what if? She'll say yes. She has to." Michael was curious but let them scheme, recognizing the careful planning in Ethan's eyes, the excited energy in their movements. That evening after dinner, the boys approached hand in hand, Ethan holding something behind his back. "We made something," Ethan announced, suddenly nervous. "For you. Both of you." They presented 4 handmade cards, not store-bought perfection but crayon-drawn love. Ethan showed 6 stick figures holding hands with the words, "Thank you for staying," written in careful letters. Lucas's featured a house with hearts floating above it, and "You make us feel safe," scrawled across the top. Noah's said simply, "Our family," with all 6 names listed. Dad, Angela, Ethan, Lucas, Noah. Max's was mostly scribbles, but in the center, Angela had clearly helped him spell one word. Love. Michael's vision blurred immediately. Angela's hand went to her mouth, tears already falling. "We've been talking," Ethan said, his voice wobbling. "And we want Angela to stay forever. Not as a maid or a housekeeper. As our," he looked at his brothers for courage. "As our mom. If she wants to be." For pairs of eyes locked on Angela, hope and fear and desperate longing written across their faces. Angela sank to her knees so she was at their level, tears streaming freely. "I would be honored," she whispered. "So honored. There's nothing in this world I want more." The boys crashed into her all at once, 4 bodies, 8 arms, all of them crying and laughing and holding on like she might disappear if they let go. Michael joined them, wrapping his arms around all 5, this strange, beautiful collection of broken pieces that somehow fit together into something whole. Later that night, after the boys were finally asleep, still excited, still talking about Angela being their mom, Michael found her on the back porch. The summer stars were bright overhead, crickets singing in the darkness. "Can we talk?" he asked. Angela nodded, and he sat beside her on the porch swing. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Michael took a breath and said what he'd been holding for weeks. "I don't know when it happened. Somewhere between the bucket of water and tonight, somewhere in all these small moments, I fell in love with you." Angela turned to face him, tears catching starlight. "I fell in love with all 5 of you. I don't know where you end and they begin anymore." "Is that enough?" Michael asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Is love enough after everything we've lost?" Angela reached for his hand. "Love isn't about forgetting what we lost, Michael. It's about choosing what we build with what remains. Elizabeth will always be part of your story. Grace will always be part of mine. But maybe," her voice caught, "maybe we can write new chapters without erasing the old ones." Michael lifted his hand to her face, his thumb tracing the path of her tears. "I'm scared. Me too. But I want this. Want you. Want us. So do I." They leaned toward each other slowly, carefully, like something precious that required gentleness. When their lips met, it was soft, tentative, full of question and answer both. A kiss that tasted like salt and hope, like grief acknowledged and future embraced, like 2 people who'd survived impossible things choosing to be brave one more time. When they pulled apart, Angela whispered, Grace would have loved them. Your boys. Elizabeth would have loved you, Michael said. They sat on that porch until the stars began to fade, two broken people who'd found each other in the wreckage, choosing to build something new. Not a replacement for what they'd lost, but something different. Something real. Something worth the risk of loving again. 1 year later, the same house, but a different life. The photographer was setting up in the backyard, adjusting lights and positioning reflectors while Michael watched from the patio doors. August again, but this time the heat felt like a blessing instead of a weight. Everything felt different now. Everything was different. Are we ready? The photographer called out. Angela appeared beside Michael, radiant in a simple white dress, her hair swept back, her smile the kind that comes from deep contentment. In her arms, wrapped in a soft pink blanket, was a baby girl, 3 months old, with a tuft of dark hair and eyes that seemed to take in the whole world with wonder. Michael's 4 sons, no, they're 4 sons now, stood in the backyard in matching light blue shirts they'd actually chosen themselves. No fighting, no complaints. They wanted to look like a family. They were a family. Let's do this, Michael said, taking Angela's hand. They walked into the summer sunshine together. Michael and Angela stood in the center, the baby in Angela's arms. The boys arranged themselves around their parents, close but not crowding, protective and gentle. Beautiful family, the photographer said, smiling. What's the baby's name? Michael and Angela spoke together, their voices overlapping. Grace Elizabeth Jordan. Named for both daughters they'd lost. Both loves that had shaped them. Both griefs that had, impossibly, led them to this moment. It wasn't about replacing what they'd lost. You can't replace people, and you shouldn't try. It was about honoring them, carrying them forward, building something new without erasing what came before. Ethan stepped closer to his baby sister, gently taking her tiny finger in his hand. Lucas leaned in and made a silly face that earned him a gummy smile. Noah began singing softly, one of the lullabies Angela had taught them. Max carefully kissed Grace Elizabeth's head, his touch featherlight, reverent. Okay, everyone look at the camera, the photographer instructed. Say cheese. Say family, the boys chorused together, and they all laughed, real, unguarded laughter that rang through the backyard like music. The camera clicked. That moment captured forever. That photo would hang in the entryway where Elizabeth's portrait used to be. Not replacing it, Michael had moved that one to his office where he could still see her smile every day, but adding to their story, expanding the narrative of who they were. Later that evening, they gathered around the dinner table. A daily tradition now, one they protected fiercely. Grace Elizabeth dozed in her bassinet nearby, making small sleeping sounds. The boys talked over each other, sharing their day, laughing, arguing playfully about whose turn it was to pick the movie later. Normal family chaos. The good kind. Michael watched Angela pass the bread to Noah, redirect Lucas's enthusiasm about a school project, smile at Ethan's careful explanation of something he'd learned. He watched his sons, these boys who'd once been so broken they seemed unreachable, navigating the ordinary magic of family dinner. And he felt overwhelmed by the sheer improbability of it all. Angela caught him staring. What? Just remembering the day you arrived. How I almost didn't hire you. How close I came to deleting your application. Ethan looked up, eyes wide. You almost didn't hire her? Best decision you ever made, Dad, Lucas said seriously. After marrying her, Ethan added, and everyone laughed. After the boys were in bed, teeth brushed, stories read, hugs given, Michael and Angela sat on the back porch with Grace Elizabeth between them. The baby made small, contented sounds, her tiny fist wrapped around Angela's finger. Do you think they're watching? Angela asked softly. Grace and Elizabeth? Michael considered the question, looking up at the stars. I think they're glad we found each other. That we found our way through the grief to something beautiful on the other side. We didn't go through the grief, Angela corrected gently. We learned to carry it together. There's a difference. Grace Elizabeth made a small sound, and they both smiled. You know what I learned through all this? Angela asked. What? Love isn't about where you start. It's not about perfect circumstances or easy paths. It's about who you choose. Every single day, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Michael reached over, took her free hand. I choose you. All 6 of you. Every single day. And we choose you right back. They sat there as the evening deepened, the three of them, soon to be joined by four sleepy boys sneaking down for one more hug. A family built from broken pieces that somehow fit together more beautifully than anything that had never been broken. The house behind them glowed with warm light. Inside those walls, where grief had once lived alone, now lived laughter and love and the ordinary chaos of family. For boys who'd learned that being broken didn't mean being beyond repair. A man who'd learned that surviving wasn't the same as living, and that it's never too late to start actually living. A woman who'd learned that loss doesn't end your story. Sometimes it's just the beginning of a different chapter. And a baby girl named for the love that came before and the love that would continue forward. Sometimes the most beautiful things grow from the broken places. Sometimes the family you need isn't the one you were born into, but the one you build together. Piece by careful piece, day by day, choice by choice. And sometimes, when grief threatens to destroy everything, love shows up in unexpected forms and reminds you that healing is possible. That joy can coexist with sorrow. That you can honor what you've lost while embracing what you've found. This was the Jordan family. Not perfect, not without scars, not free from hard days or moments when the weight of memory pressed heavy, but loved, deeply, fiercely, impossibly loved. And that was everything. The end.
Before you go, take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe to Nell's Haven. Stories like this remind us that even the most broken moments can become something beautiful. And your support helps us keep sharing messages of hope. When you're ready, click the next story on your screen for more interesting stories and keep the journey going.